Sikolino Lobutae, Sikola Mulungu, Sikolino Lobutae, Sikola Pansi, Sikolino Lobutae, Sikola Pansi, Sikolino Lobutae, Sikola Mulungu, Sikolino Lobutae, Sikola Mulungu, Sikolino Lobutae, Alanikale Mulova, Atiuya Sasebeza, Inenikale Mulova, Atiuya Sasebeza, Alanikule Mishanga, Atiwai wa Mishanga, Inenikule Mishanga, Atiwai wa Mishanga, Alanikale Fishamani, Atiuya ni Fishamani, Alanikale Fishamani, Atiuya ni Fishamani, Alaokulise Musalu, Atiwai wa Musalu, Iwe ukulise Musalu, Atiwai wa Musalu, Koma Sikola Pansi, Sikolino Lobutae, Sikola Mulungu, Sikolino Lobutae, Sikola Mulungu, Sikolino Lobutae, Sikola Pansi, Sikolino Lobutae, Sikola Pansi, Sikolino Lobutae, Sikola Mulungu, Sikolino Lobutae, Sikola Mulungu, Sikolino Lobutae, Sikola Pansi, Sikolino Lobutae, Sikola Pansi, Sikolino Lobutae, Sikola Mulungu, Sikolino Lobutae, Sikola Mulungu, Sikolino Lobutae, Alaukale Hole Mela, Atiuya ni Hole Mela, Alaukale Hole Mela, Atiuya ni Hole Mela, Inenikale Osauka, Atiuya ni Osauka, Alanikale Pikamba, Atiuya ni Wapikamba, Alanilise Pirimba, Atiuya ni Wapirimba, Alaukale Cheamani, Atiuya ni Cheamani, Iwe ukale Cheamani, Atiuya ni Cheamani, Alaukale Kapokola, Atiuya ni Kapokola, Iwe ukale Kapokola, Atiuya ni Kapokola, Inenikale Musoja, Atiuya ni Musoja, Alanikale Masiye, Atiuya ni Masiye, Iwe ukale Wetelesi, Atiuya ni Wetelesi, Alaukale Wetelesi, Atiuya ni Wetelesi, Alaukale Namweke, Atiuya ni Namapweke, Inenikale Shimapweke, Atiuya ni Shimapweke.
Hello, good evening, Chiwempala, good evening, world, good evening, wherever you are listening to us from. We are aware that this is a little late, but we had something to talk about, and so we are coming this time because it's very, very, very important. So we are going to let you share this link with as many people as possible. Several changes regarding the COVID situation in Lusaka and several other nations in the world. And so it appears like there is some anxiety that is connected to the COVID situation, but there is some business that we've got to take care of today. And so business we must. I'm joined here by my co-host, Linda Banks. Linda, welcome to our program today.
Good evening, Dr. Munshya, and I'm looking forward to a sudden change in trajectory. I've just been conversing with Dr. Mjajati, which has been very enlightening. Now, slight change into business. Good evening, viewers, and welcome to TV Bakwetu.
I did listen to part of your discussion with Dr. Mjajati. Great job done. And the topic was men's health and erectile dysfunction.
Yes.
Very important topic. And men's health generally, because this is Movember, and so we need to pay attention to men. But if you're men, we don't pay attention to them. So they go causing all kinds of kerfuffle everywhere. But thank you, Linda. That was a great job. Keep it up.
Thank you.
Dr. Grieve Chelwa, welcome to TV Bakwetu today.
Thank you, Dr. Munshya, and thank you, Miss Linda Banks. It's nice to be back here. Last time you were Mr. Elias Munshya, a week from defending your PhD dissertation. So congratulations. I told you you'd make it.
Thank you very much. It was very interesting, and it was carried live on Facebook. My PhD is pretty much a Facebook PhD.
New age, you're a new tech PhD graduate.
All right. So we're going to let as many people as possible share this link, because I have questions for you, Dr. Grieve, and so does Linda. We have a lot of questions regarding the confusion surrounding all these, because we were thinking that economists are the most consistent people. They are going to help us figure this out. And now we are getting confused as to what is the problem, because we don't seem to even have found what the problem is, let alone for us to go to the solutions. And we've spoken to several schools of thought, and it confuses me, because there's the school of thought, that, and that. So it's a little confusing, but we are very happy to have you here today. And so we have some questions for you. Linda, do you have some questions for Dr. Grieve Chelwa? Of course you do, right?
Absolutely. I always have questions. But Dr. Grieve, it's lovely to have you. We always enjoy having you here. TV Bakwetu is your second home, or if it's not, it should be your second home. So we'll dive into, I think it would be very good to, first of all, before we bombard you with questions, just to find out where you are with the current state of affairs. We want to pick your brains. What are you thinking? Are you happy with the current status quo? If not, then we can dissect the various issues surrounding your happiness or unhappiness as to what the new dawn is doing.
Okay. So is that a general question? Is it
a general?
Okay.
Yeah. We're still diving in.
Yeah, I think so. Here's the picture. The picture is we have a 127 billion kwacha budget, right? In addition to that, we have debt in billions of dollars. Last time you were here, Dr. Grieve, you were very correct in your assessment that you believed the statistics that were coming from the Ministry of Finance. And so we have billions in debt at the moment. Then we have got a very large domestic debt as well. There are several bottlenecks everywhere economically, and then there are so many rumors that are flying around. What is the factual state? Where are we now?
Well, by the way, to answer Linda's question, I'm in Lusaka, so I'm back home in Lusaka, so yeah, enjoy. I always love being home. Where are we at this moment is the question we're asking. I think it's now 3 months since the historic election of Mr. Haka in the HLMA. And I think we're at the moment, students of political science will tell you after 90 days, 100 days, people begin to sober up and then begin to reflect and begin to apply their minds on the presidency that just happened. So we're at this moment now where I think the rubber has hit the road, and we are beginning to debate quite vigorously as a country. And I like it. I like what I'm seeing. People are debating, people are engaging. people are less euphoric because we're all euphoric on August 16 when Judge Esau Chulu declared Mr. Hichilema president. And we've been in a state of euphoria, which was good because we were celebrating what we had done, which was momentous. But now we're beginning to sober up and critically reflect. And there's a lot of debate in the country, as you have seen. But what is really encouraging about this moment is that the debates about economic policy. We're not debating whether some people are hiding figures or not, whether some people are keeping certain things hidden. We're really debating economic policy. And for me, this is a healthy debate. We're debating about which way forward, not what is the debt. We're all debating how should we move from here to there. And that for me is a healthy debate. So I think we should be proud as a country to be at
We're
this
making
point.
strides. We're making headways.
Yes.
Today, from crawling now, we're beginning to walk slowly.
That's a perfect metaphor. We are making strides. Yes, we are. I think what's animating a lot of people is there's disagreement about the path, how we should go to the promised land, and that's healthy. I disagree with the path that our economic stewards are taking us in, but that's okay, right? Disagreements about policy are okay.
Absolutely.
Right? Exactly. So this is where we are.
Fantastic. That leads me to the first question. What path do you think we should be taking?
So one of the things that I think I'm a little sad about is that I had hoped immediately Mr. Hichilema had put together his economic team. You recall that Dr. Msokotwane was the first cabinet appointment he made, right? Pretty early on, right? And I had hoped that at that moment, and I think this point has been raised by, it's not original to me. In academia, we're very honest about who originates ideas. This point is not original to me. It's original to Mr. Emmanuel Mwamba, ex-ambassador to Ethiopia. He made a really interesting point the other day. He said we should have had an economic indawa. I think he was making a really good point there because we should have converged somewhere in some insaka under a tree, wherever, but we should have debated, like Dr. Munshya said, what is the problem? First of all, we should have diagnosed the problem. And then from there, we should have debated what are the potential paths forward. And they're numerous. But I think from the moment Mr. Hichilema got into State House, or got into office, he had settled on one path. Him and his team had settled on one path. And that's a path I disagree with. I think we put all our eggs in the IMF basket. And I think the last time I was here, we had discussion and we had raised some alarm bells about what the IMF often wants in exchange for assistance. We talked about they will ask us to remove some subsidies or ask us to, austerity, to slow down economic expenditure, so on and so forth. And it appears that these things are becoming quite obvious now. It's no longer a rumor, right? No less person bigger than the central bank governor last week told us on Thursday, I think, that we need to raise electricity tariffs and fuel prices. Dr. Msokotwane has also been saying the same thing. So clearly we are on this IMF path. So that's a path I disagree with. I think we should have explored different options, but I suspect we will have more time in this particular debate to unpack some of that.
Yes.
So in your own words, I know you've been here before and we discussed at length looking at the problems that we had. But in your own words, very briefly, what are the problems that we have?
We have numerous problems, right? Key among them is the issue of debt, especially foreign debt. And I think I did say in this program the last time that domestic debt can be a problem, but one doesn't worry so much about domestic debt precisely because the debt is in kwachas. And who are the people who print kwachas? It's the Zambian people via the central bank. So I don't worry so much about domestic debt, but foreign debt is the issue. So one part of the problem is the debt issue. What to do about the debt issue? We've got Eurobonds that are due quite soon. One is due next year. The other part of the problem is that we had economic slowdown, right? As you recall, the performance in the 2000s during Mwanawasa was spectacular. And then at some point, starting about 2015, we began to hit economic headwinds and our growth slowed down. And it's, I think then COVID came and even made things even worse. So we have very slow growth. For a country that is poor, that is young, with a young population. We're growing minimally. I don't know what, I should have looked at the budget, but I think we're under this year, we're going to grow at a 1% or slightly less than that, or slightly over than that. That is not enough, Munshya. We've got a formula in economics which says if you want to figure out how long it will take for incomes to double, for economy to double when we're growing at 1% per year, it will take 70 years. Right, you divide 70 by the growth rate. So when the growth rate grows, the doubling time also reduces. So growing at 1% means takes us 70 years to double our people's incomes. Our people can't wait 70 years. 70 years is like 2 generations. If it grows at 2%, it reduces to 35 years. So growing is important, right? So growing is important precisely for that kind of. So the biggest problem we have, Ms. Banks and Dr. Munshya, is that, our economy is not growing. We have a huge debt problem. So immediately we need to get the economy growing again. We need to resolve this debt issue somehow, right? And we've chosen a certain path. So the government has chosen a particular path to do that. And their path is to engage the IMF, right? As well as to impose austerity measures. But that is what I think some people are disagreeing with, and I'm one of those.
Okay. When you say austerity measures, what exactly is meant there? Because when I go to the budget that was presented, the 2022 budget, it's not an austerity budget.
No, that's very true. I think austerity has to be put in context, right? Often, so there's many ways we can look at this question of austerity, right? So one easy characteristic of it is the removal of subsidies. That is austere. That's austerity in itself, because we're removing the subsidies that are very useful to the poor. So that in itself can be a simple measure of indicator of sort of conditions of austerity. Another larger discussion is to think about how much do we need to spend going forward to get ourselves out of this situation. And I think we need to spend a lot more than the government is planning to spend in the near term and in the medium term. The IMF took out projections, I think, in the World Economic Outlook. They took out projections of where Zambia needs to be, how much spending Zambia needs to do over the next 5 years to get itself out of a debt situation. And that trajectory is clearly showing austerity, because it shows, as a percentage of GDP, reduction in that particular ratio over the next 4 years. So this thing of austerity is not simply just an absolute number. I look at 173 billion and I celebrate. The question ought to be, how much do we need to be spending to be getting ourselves out of this hole, right? And I think the government is planning to spend a whole lot less than that number. And that really is your indicator of austerity. So it's not just saying the Munshya household was spending 10 kwacha, now they're spending 12. This is not austerity, but the question is they should have been spending 15 or 20 kwacha.
Dr. Grieve, we want to get it very clear from you that this current budget, you have issues because it's not spending enough. Am I getting you correctly?
No, it's a little bit more complicated than that, right? So the headline number itself is a great number. I was very surprised to see the headline number 173 billion kwacha, but there are certain components of it, right, that signal austerity in the short term, right? So one of those is removal of energy subsidies. One of those is the government is planning to reform, I think in the agriculture season 2022-2023, they're planning to do what? They're planning to reform the farmer input support program and convert it into a comprehensive agriculture support program. I have also heard quite reliably from people who are farmers. I'm not a farmer myself, my parents are, but the allocation of FISP inputs in this particular season, 2021-2022, has been reduced a little bit. So those are signals of austerity, right? Don't look at the headline number. The headline number might be useful, but we need to look at the distribution of that headline number. Number two, we also need to look at the percentage of that headline number as a percentage of GDP over the medium term. When one does that, you can see that the projections are suggesting austerity.
Okay.
That is correct. Now, would you say that the projection number that the government has put as a headline compared to what they're doing do not tally?
No. I would not say that. No, I think everything tallies. I think there was a debate when the budget was presented that some numbers are not adding up. No, that's not the debate I'm making. I think the Minister of Finance was very thorough. His accountants were very thorough. The numbers do add up. But the question we ought to be asking is, the question that I'm asking at least, or at least the point that I'm trying to make, is that to get ourselves out of this hole, we need to spend a whole lot more on the right things, not to be spending less on energy subsidies, for example, as we're proposing, right? Spending less on agriculture. Yes. So we should, this one short number, 173 billion is very encouraging, but we have to look at the trend, right? Or the projection over the next 4 or 5 years, right? And those projections are contained in the IMF's World Economic Outlook. And the IMF is saying, over the next 5 years, Vane, to get yourselves out of this mess, you can spend a lot in this first year, like you're trying to do, even though you need to remove some subsidies. But over the medium term, you will have to slow down your expenditure.
Yeah.
Right. Those are the projections that they're making. You have to slow down your expenditure, and that's austerity. That's the issue that we're worried about.
So before we dig deep into you giving us a clear, concise path that you feel the government should be taking, I would like to find out from you, Dr. Chelwa, do you think it's too late for that endeavor to take place before they start getting into the nitty-gritty of how we're going to spend this colossal sum that they've put as a headline in their budget?
I mean, it's a very interesting question. Is it too late? I mean, we can have it now, but it seems like what's the old expression? The horse has already left the barn, or the train has already left the train station, right? Because we're already talking to the IMF, right? And talks are supposed to conclude, as I understand it, at the end of November. So we've already agreed, right? So I think process-wise, what should have happened, there should have been a process of deliberation. Say, Vane, let's talk. And then that process should have legitimated whatever came, right? So if that process had led to a IMF route, I was going to be happy with that. But I think what happened is there was very little consultations, and then we got on the IMF train. So, Ms. Banks, I don't know, is it too late? It feels to me like I think the initiative has already been lost. And also from a strategy point of view, as you recall, when Mr. Hichilema was elected into office, it wasn't just Zambians who were euphoric. Everybody was euphoric, even our Eurobond, the people we owe money to. And I think that would have been the moment to quickly get together and quickly take advantage of that moment. And I think we didn't do that. I'm not look. I mean, Barack Obama had his issues, but there's something that he did immediately he became president in 2008, right? When he was inaugurated on 20th January 2008, within the first 100 days, I beg your pardon, the first 100 days, he passed a very large stimulus package, because they remember that the US economy was in a crisis the time he was taking over, right? He didn't spend a lot of time blaming George W. Bush, but he went to work and saying, okay, I've inherited this big problem. What do I need to do? Let's pass a huge stimulus bill, which would have been impossible to pass after those 100 days because the euphoria would have worn away. He was able to get Republican and Democratic congressmen and senators to pass through this huge bill, right? I think that's the initiative that we've lost at this moment. I wished we had converged pretty early on that time and put a plan. Yeah.
I would like to think that all hope is not lost yet. We had Mrs. Sulumba the other day and Aka and a few other economists that we have been conversing with. And you guys all have your own prescriptions. I think it's now time for us to dive into what you feel the government could do right now. We need, at least, for goodness sake, we need to try and be positive. It's not too late yet. I'm sure something can be done to rectify this. Or is it too late?
And the point you make is an interesting one, that we all have different views on how we need to move forward. And an endeavor would have been a great clearing house for those views, right? Converge everybody who feels very strongly about, convene everybody who feels very strongly about how to move from here to there. And we debate these issues. Somebody will say, no, the IMF. Grieve Chelwa will say, no, let's get the money from this person, a grandmother, whatever. All of it, we debate in that particular forum, and we put up a robust plan. So anyways, for me as an academic now, so one way is there's word of practicalities and there's a word of academia. I think we even at this moment, I think we should put the IMF on ice, right? We should put the IMF on ice and say, look, Vane, by the way, this is not just an economic problem. The problem also has political connotations. As you've already started to see, if you've been following social media, the minute it became quite clear to large chunks of the population that electricity tariffs and fuel prices would go up, you saw the animation. So it's no longer just an economic problem. It's going to become a political problem as well. So I think it's not too late to say, let's put the IMF on ice and let's begin to see what we can do going forward. I mean, my own solution was, at the time, and I haven't thought about it now in the last 2 months or so, at the time we should have engaged our Eurobond investors, right? Now, the narrative is that these guys, we owe them money, yes, and we are going to kill ourselves to pay it to them. Now, these guys took a bet on us, right? When you go to a bank and take out a mortgage, it's not 100% guaranteed that the bank will get its money back. The bank is taking a bet on you. Our friends lent the PF government in 2012, right? They lent $750 million to the PF government, right? It's 10 years later, and we should say to them, hey, Vane, listen, right? You took a bet 10 years ago. Clearly, you kindly lent an irresponsible government money. Let's talk, right? Let's talk. We're reasonable people. We're new government, new mandate. We're reasonable people, as you can see. This $750 million, we might not be able to give it to you now, or entirely, or all of it. Let's talk. And I think some of that talking should have happened pretty early on when Mr. Hichilema became president, right? But the narrative is that we're going to kill ourselves, Kuba Pera, Nindala Mashabo. Yes, it's their money, but they also betted on us, right? They also betted on us. They took a bet on us, to us. I mean, the bank takes a bet when they give you a loan, right? When you loan a friend money, you're taking a bet. That's why you're always asking all these questions. What can I keep in exchange? What sort of collateral? But I think the narrative is such that we're going to kill ourselves to give this money to these angels. Right? We have to come together and say, Vane, we took a wrong bet on the PF in 2011 by voting them into office. Maybe we made a mistake. I don't know. So let's get together and try to talk this through. Yeah, these are some of the things that I wished had happened a little bit earlier. But
Dr. Grieve, that's exactly what the Ministry of Finance is saying, and in fact, that's the messaging from the president, that they are talking to Euro bond holders. As a matter of fact, when the president went to Scotland, he had a meeting with Euro bond holders in London. Isn't that enough? That's not what you mean.
No, I saw that. I think that's really cool. And I think I laud him for meeting with them. But when he got back from Glasgow and was at the airport, right, I think we all focused on that click comment. But if you read that, if you go and rewatch that particular video, he talked about that's their money. We owe it to them. He was quite clear that we need to pay this money back. And that's a narrative that I'm taking on to say it is their money, quite all right, but they also took a bet on this. They lent pretty careless government money. And I think let's talk. Let's get together and talk and try to see how together we can get ourselves out of this situation. That's what a bank does, right? They come to you and say, you can pay. What's the plan?
Yeah, I think HH is one of those like very good people to lend money to, because you're guaranteed that he'll pay it back. But when it comes to government finances, there's room to renegotiate and kind of delay the payment as well.
Right. Okay, Dr. Grieve, here is my issue with what you are saying. Okay. On the other hand, you are saying that we've not spent enough. We need to spend more. And then flip that, you're saying that we need to very lightly, I'm using the word blackmail. So we need to let the people that lent us money to say, let us renegotiate and stuff like that. These two ideas do not seem to comport together, Dr. Grieve. If we spend more, we will have to borrow because there isn't anywhere else where we'll get the money. On the other hand, you are saying that we need to take a softer cunning approach to the people that we are owing money. Help me understand how these two ideas can be reconciled. Because in my opinion,
how much time do you have?
Plenty of time.
If you are owing the Eurobond, I think it makes sense to reassure the Eurobond holders that you have their best interest at heart as you try to see how you can borrow more money to either clear them or go and borrow more. But to say that you tell them they took a bet on us, and if they took a bet on us, they took a risk, and if they took a risk, they were irresponsible, and if they were irresponsible, let it go. But at the same time, on the other hand, we'll still need to borrow more in order for us to spend. Question.
Yeah, I mean, these are super interesting questions. By the way, they took a bet, and that's why the bond has an interest rate. If it was risk-free, that interest rate would have been zero. So the fact that there's an interest rate, that interest rate is itself a signal of risk. I think you've heard sometimes when people talk about the international, you must have heard this term, or when we defaulted last year, you must have heard, or Zambia's bonds on the international markets, the yields have gone up. You must have heard that expression. That expression was really talking about interest rates have gone up, which essentially meant the risk has gone up. So there's risk. These are risky bets. This is they were making a risky bet. It wasn't a riskless bet, and that's why it attracted an interest rate. But you have to remember that people spin narratives that are self-serving. So in the Eurobond markets, there's this narrative that is very self-serving, which says, Nanguchibe shani, you need to pay. That's true. And I don't think, and I think I'm with Mr. Hichilema when we say we need to pay them. But the question is, right, that's all I'm saying. That's one argument that I'm making here. Now, the argument about spending more, Dr. Munshya, is not necessarily the case that you need to borrow more to spend more, right? And there's different levels here. One level is 173 billion, Ilya. We can reallocate it in a proper way. That's one option, right? So you can reallocate it in a proper way. Spend more on the poor. And on sort of spend more on the poor and spend more on activities that are likely to generate economic activity. That's one way. Another way is you could increase your tax collections. So you could, close some of the tax loopholes that we have in this country. And I don't need to say this to you. You know this. You've heard about the literature on illicit financial flows. You know that we're losing millions of dollars, if not billions of dollars, from all sorts of nefarious characters who are denying us tax revenues. So you can also do that, and then you can borrow. So the point is to say it's not entirely the case that to increase expenditure you always have to borrow. You can look inwards, right? And I think the last time I was on this show, Dr. Munshya, I made the point about the copper price, historic high last week, $11,000 per metric ton. Never before in the history of copper have we hit a price so high. The question is, in Chiwempala, are they going to see a change? Your pricing for price Africa $11,000 per ton, will it just be a newspaper thing, or it will impact them directly there in Chiwempala? That's the question we ought to be asking, right? So I think this is the point that I'm trying to make. It's a point to say, we have narratives, right? And sometimes those narratives can be self-serving. Right. There's another narrative that I hope we can slay on this program, one of saying if you reduce corporate income tax, foreign investment will come. That's another self-serving narrative, mostly pushed by multinational corporations, right? All of us on this program are old enough to remember the 1990s when we were giving tax holidays to all manner of companies. 30 years later, where are the jobs which were promised? Right, where's the transformative economies that were promised by all these tax incentives we were giving? So I think that's the point I'm trying to make. That there's myth, there's fact, there's also narrative making.
All right. So then what you are saying is, in order for us to spend more, we do not necessarily need to borrow more. What you're saying is we can look to ourselves, plug the gaps that we have in illicit inflow. Do you have an estimate of how much we can raise out of that?
I mean, I haven't looked at I know that some of the most authoritative estimates for the continent as a whole put the whole at $50 billion per annum, but the Zambian one is easily in the low billions. It's not a small number. I mean, we know the amount of tax shifting, tax dodging that, for example, the mining companies are involved in, right? I mean, if you think about how much copper they're exporting, you can easily do a back of the envelope calculation. So what I'm saying is not a secret, right? There's a lot of work that's been done by Oxfam, Action Aid, all these other people to estimate some of these numbers, and they're huge. And I think we could be directing some of our energies there.
All right.
So apart from the mines, where else do you think we could get this revenue from? And obviously, taxing people would not be very attractive for the New Dawn government.
I agree. I think I'm in fact even not. Yeah, it would be even for me, my own sense of economics, that we don't want to tax our people already poor, right? We don't even have a middle class to write home about. So it's the corporate sector as well. So the mines, then there's a larger corporate sector. We've got Zambia breweries, we've got companies in the corporate, Zambia Sugar, there are a lot of companies in the corporate sector which we could tax. As you've seen, Dr. Stumbeko Msakotwana has done the reverse again. That's what I said. A budget. Look at the headline number, but also look at the reallocation. Who's being given largesse, from whom is largesse being taken from, right? He has reduced the corporate income tax from 35% to 30%. That's the nominal corporate income tax rate. That's a gift he's given the corporate sector, right? But there's a narrative that this is supposed to lead to more investment, right? Now, this is sort of my area of expertise. When you look at the evidence, there's very little evidence suggesting that foreign investment responds to these tax incentives. If they want to come, they'll come. If somebody wants to marry you, they will marry you. Whatever kind of, by the way, if you look at like copper, how many people produce copper in the world? Very few.
Not many, yeah.
It's kind of silly to say that no, we need to cut copper prices so that we can invite. Now becoming a very valuable commodity on the international market as we make all these electric cars. So I think we have to be very careful about some of these narratives that can be self-serving.
Dr. Grieve, copper is quite competitive, right? We are in a competitive market, and copper has crashed before. In the 70s, we got into the mess that we are in, partly because copper prices crashed. So I really find it a little strange that you would say that because we have no competition, therefore we can do anything that we want to do. It's cheaper for the Katangese mining, for a person to invest in Katanga than it is in Zambia as things stand now.
I mean, so the fact that the price is at $11,000 per metric ton shows me that there's a shortage of copper in the world. And there are forecasts that are suggesting that this way in a commodity super cycle where the prices are going up, because everybody wants to have an electric car, right? Tesla is one of the most valuable companies on the stock exchange now, precisely because everybody's forecasting a future where we have less cars which are driven by hydrocarbons and more by electric vehicles. So there is a shortage of copper. Yes, all the Katangese copper is not sufficient to meet this demand that's going to come in the future. Yes, not everybody we can't get all the copper from Katanga. We can get it from Chile, we can get it from Zambia, we can get it from Katanga, right? So we're also a player in this market. We're not insignificant, we're a player in this market. And we're also more stable. It's much easier to deal with us than it is to deal with our brothers and sisters across the border, right? Some of these are some of the advantages that we have. So we should not, I mean, of course, I'm not saying that, the corporate income tax on copper should be 100%. No, I mean, it should be set at a reasonable rate that allows us to meet the multiple objectives of the country. The objectives of the country are not just to produce copper for copper's sake. From Chiwempara, from Changa, open pit, from Konkola, copper mine, from Konkola, I've forgotten now my geography. Konkola is a shaft. Konkola shaft, whatever. No, I mean, yes, we just don't want to sit to let Ambama track to let copper. No, we also want to see that copper transforming lives like it did in the calendar days, right? This is what
I think you are onto something there, actually, Dr. Grieve. If we have these resources, and a very important point that you raised about Tesla, all these electric cars that are being made, perhaps not in Zambia, but Europe and the Americas, they're all moving away from the odd type of motoring. It's all now coming into clean energy and, electric cars. And we have got the natural resources, that the key components for creating this. So I think you're definitely onto something there. Not necessarily being greedy as a country and hiking the prices, but capitalizing on what we have so that we can start paying off in Congolese.
That's true. I mean, I'll tell you one choice we've made. Dr. Stumbeko Msokotwane has made mineral royalty tax deductible. What that means in simple English, it means, so in the budget, he expects to get about $700 million, about $1 billion, say, from mineral royalty tax, which the mining companies will pay. Now, I'll tell a story about why we have mineral royalty taxes in the first instance. But before I go to that story, let me tell this deduction story. So about $1 billion the mining companies will pay in mineral royalty taxes, and then they can expense that $1 billion from their revenues when trying to calculate profit tax, which is corporate income tax. So it's given them a gift. So they'll give us, this is new, it wasn't there in budgets before. They'll pay $1 billion in mineral royalty, and then they'll think about that $1 billion as a cost of business. So that when they're calculating profit ni revenue minus costs, then you get a profit, you calculate your taxes on that profit. When they're calculating that profit, wakafumiako from revenue, they'll remove that $1 billion. So it's almost like it's a net off. It's like a gift we've given them. You've seen it. We've given them this gift. We've made it tax deductible. This wasn't there before, right? So this is a gift we're giving them. Right? And then we're looking for money, right? We owe how much? We owe some billions here. This is the kind of now I'll tell a story about mineral royalty taxes and why we have mineral royalty taxes. The reason why we have mineral royalty taxes and why they've become quite popular is because the mining houses are very good at hiding profits. Because remember, corporate income tax is an income tax, so it is levied on profit. Remember, profit, but we're very clever at hiding the profit, right? I think you heard for the first time in Mopani's history, you heard the story. For the first time in Mopani's history, Mopani declared a profit. This year, after the Zambian government had taken it over. Mwalimu, I think the new minister of mines went to...
Yeah. He's making waves, isn't he? He's making waves.
But isn't this strange? Linda, so for the last 20 years, Mopani has been making losses.
What changed?
Exactly. So because mining houses are good at hiding profits, what we decided to do instead, we will levy a mineral royalty tax, which is levied on the actual copper that's leaving. So we just count the tracks. That today, if you're from accounting, track, 1, 2, 3, and then we levy the mineral royalty tax. It's easier for us to administer it. So we can do something. Exactly. Remember that thing that we can collect, that little something, we've now made it tax deductible. We've allowed them to pay it, but also to subtract it from revenue as they're calculating profits. It's a strange policy. It's a strange policy.
What we need is money, right?
Yes.
And so the more corporate taxes are paid, the more money we have.
Correct.
If you can have an incentive of the mineral royalty incentive, and that attracts more investment into our mining, it means then that eventually we're going to get more in corporate taxes. So I don't see why that should be a problem.
Okay, there are many hypotheticals. Clearly, you're a lawyer, Dr. Munshya, so I'll use the language of hypotheticals. Hypothetical number one is that, if you give tax incentive, the investment follows like manna from heaven. That's not true. I mean, there's a long literature in economics about if you offer these guys tax incentives, does the investment come? And that literature finds that actually it doesn't come. These guys will come. In South Sudan today, you find people who are drilling for oil.
Yeah, so as people are fighting, others are drilling for oil and taking it out.
Yes, these people will come whether you give them incentive or not. And I don't need to talk about the literature, just Zambia's evidence. I told you, the three of us are old enough to remember the Chiluba days of the 1990s and how we bended backward so much. You do remember? Tuarepera ama company ama tax holidays, ama furnishing companies yaku South Africa, mwapera tax holiday, yaku ana Fiat E5, vaisalana shop. You remember those kinds of stories? Investors, as Michael Sata used to famously refer to them as infestors. Investors are very interesting characters. So hypothetical number one, Munshya, that if you give them incentive, the investment will follow, which will create jobs. Hypothetical number two is that if they come, they will be honest in declaring their profits. And the history of extractive industries, it's not just a Zambian issue, it's a problem with extractive industries generally. There's a lot of opacity. We fight, governments really struggle to try to tax the extractive sector. So those are the hypotheticals. The other thing is also mining is becoming very capital intensive now, right? So even when the investment comes, it won't create the jobs that we need to employ the people of Chilwa. It's become very capital intensive. So it's mostly machines and very few jobs being created. What we want is jobs for our people. That's what we want. We want jobs for our people. Exactly.
But in order for you to have those jobs, you obviously need investment, and you need companies investing in the copper itself. So let's take Kansanshi. Let's take Kansanshi. The copper belt has moved right now from copper belt to the northwestern province, and this is in real jobs. We've got real jobs, real people that are employed. Even if you're calling it capital intensive. So there is a real benefit in having these companies come and find Zambia attractive in order for them to invest. Because once you attract them, then it becomes easy for you to form long-term relationships and work around them. But I do get the idea that you come from the school of thought, which says, you give them tax holidays, they're not going to stay. But we are competing against Katanga, we are competing against Chile, and we are not as competitive at the moment. That is just the truth.
I think
at the moment.
Yeah, I just want to clarify one question. One point. The point is not to say if we give them tax incentives, they won't stay. The point is we give them a tax incentive is a cost to us. You remember, Munshya, we are losing money by giving them that incentive. We are saying, Ngatwalishta collect 10 kwacha. Nomba, we won't collect that 10 kwacha so that you can invest here. The question is, are the costs, and the cost, I want to bring this cost home to you. It's not just that 10 kwacha. It is the cost of the hospitals we could have built. It is the cost of the schools we could have run.
No,
that is the tax incentive. No, that is the cost. We're giving up the ability to tax you so that we can provide these goods and services, these social services, so that you can come in and invest, right? Now, what I'm saying is that often that cost is never really justifiable. The cost is not the
impression. You're giving the impression that mines are not being taxed. Mines are actually being taxed.
No, they're not. They're not. I mean,
from budget 2022, they're being taxed.
Yeah,
the only issue is you are saying that because we don't have but what you are saying is because we don't have that mineral royalty tax, therefore they're not being taxed enough. What I'm saying is, if we are using the mineral royalty tax exemption in order to attract more investment into our mining, so that we can, in fact, broaden the tax base, that is a better sacrifice than not. Then we remain competitive with Katanga, we remain competitive with Chile, and we have a little more bucks in our pockets.
No, I think so. There are lots of hypotheticals. So there's a hypothetical you've made, and I take that hypothetical to the evidence, right? The hypothetical I'm making. So the way you think about economic policy is as follows. You make trade-offs. So one trade-off is to say, we're going to incur a cost, right? We're going to give a tax incentive, which is a cost, right? Now, this cost is justifiable. We don't just give out gifts as a country, but this is a gift we're giving. It is justifiable to the extent it can bring in foreign investment to do all these wonderful things that we want to do. Now, what I'm saying is the historical record suggests otherwise. We've been giving incentives to these mines for close to 3 decades now. And the calculations folks are making is that the incentives have not justified they've not justified the investments that have come in. I mean, we haven't created enough jobs. We haven't these guys have even been dodging from paying taxes. So really, it has cost us even more than those tax incentives we gave them in the beginning, right? But the other important thing that we need to understand is also narratives. I want to talk about narratives in today's program. We tell stories. When I say investor, For most Zambians, we think foreign. No, we need them to come. Come on, man. Some of these things we could run them ourselves. That's another narrative I want to challenge. And then when we run them ourselves,
I believe there is something attractive in saying that we can run them ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
Canada right now is looking for foreign investment in mining.
Mm-hmm.
China is looking for foreign investment in
Mm-hmm.
whatever sector it is.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes the use of the thing that we can run it ourselves
Mm-hmm.
becomes self-defeating and limiting.
Mm-hmm.
But in the sense that we say it's Chandi, this is mine, this is my thing, and I've got to run it myself, when in fact that does not add anything. In my opinion, China changed because they opened their country to foreign direct investment, because even today, China is the Chinese themselves, they don't have a lot of money. So China is still a developing country in the sense that its citizens do not have disposable income. And if China traded within itself, it cannot be a rich country.
Yeah. But
so
Dr.
it attracts
Munshya,
others to come in.
Yeah.
So the idea that we can just do it on our own and everything else is limiting to an extent. Is there a middle ground where we integrate both? Welcome back, Linda. I knew that
so much. Apologies.
It might have been something to do with
internet connection. Vazesko bachitushimia na hivyo kwani Vazesko England.
And so that is where the thing is. Sometimes the stories that we are telling, Dr. Grieve, basically there are two stories. We can do it ourselves, and we add the Africanisms in that, and we say we can do it and everything else.
No,
when
but
we are lacking capacity. Sometimes we do not have enough growth in our own domestic market to drive that growth.
Let me tell you an interesting story. So I get the point you're making, Dr. Munshya, that some of our colleagues are very romantic in when they say we can do things ourselves. But I'm not one of those people. I often either have evidence or often look towards history, right? So I think it's important to, for example, unpack the China story, right? China opened up, yes, in about 1978 when Mao Zedong died and Deng Xiaoping took over. But what China did, Deng Xiaoping said, as we open, it will be like we're trying to cross a stream and we'll be feeling for the pebbles at the ground. So he said it was careful opening up. If you see China's opening up, it was very carefully done, very carefully orchestrated by the Communist Party, very carefully and very slowly and in an experimental way. And that's how they got it right. Right. So China didn't open up in one fell swoop, big bang. What if the way we opened up in the 90s? They did it very calmly. They paced themselves. And even now in China, for example, when you want to set up an enterprise there, you don't just show up. You form a joint venture with some Chinese entity. Often that Chinese entity will take a 51% stake. And often there will be line items which say, you have to transfer technology, you have to transfer know-how, you have to do all these kinds of things. That's the opening up that the Chinese Communist Party has orchestrated in China over the last 3 to 4 decades. And that's why poverty rates have fallen the way they have there. Right now, let me talk about Chile, right, which is another copper producing country. Chile, in 1971, nationalizes its mines, right? They have a Salvador Allende. He nationalizes the mines. In 73, there's a coup d'etat, and General Pinochet takes over, right? And when Chile nationalizes the mines, Chileans begin to run the mines. And you know what happened when Pinochet came? Let me finish the story. It's an important story.
Yes, I know Chileans run the mines. What does that mean exactly?
Did they get shares into the mines?
Yes, they got Chileans to run the mines, right? But the point I'm trying to make, to run the mines. Yes, Chileans run the mines, right?
By buying shares.
No, they were running the mines. What I say is the Chilean people began to take control of their own mines and began to run them themselves insofar as meeting the objectives are concerned.
Is it the government or the Chilean citizens? I just want to...
Okay. Obviously, they formed a holding company called Codelco, like we formed Zambia Consolidated Copper Mines, but owned by the Zambian people, owned by the Chilean people. right? Now, one interesting thing is that Pinochet was what we call a neoliberal. He believed in privatization, the person who took over Chile. When Pinochet arrived in 1973, he privatized everything in Chile, a right-wing guy, except the mines, because he understood that these are the crown jewels of the country.
A bit like what Margaret Thatcher did to Britain.
Exactly. Tell us, Linda. Yeah, she privatized some things and kept some things, right?
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Thatcher is as ultra neoliberal as you can get, but even she understood. Just like Pinochet was ultra right wing as you can get, but even he understood that some things are the family silver. To paraphrase Francis Counder's book, Selling the Family Silver.
That's exactly what happened in Zambia. Zambia did not privatize everything. That's just reality. Zambia has privatized some things and has left some things unprivatized.
No, but we privatize the crown jewels.
Yeah, Linda, what valuable thing have we left?
Yeah.
We still have several IDC companies. Okay.
Tell me which ones. The most valuable being Zesco, right? Even Zesco was almost put on the chopping block, but luckily some people prevailed in the late 90s and it wasn't, right? But I'll tell you, we like Linda is making, what valuable thing did we keep? We sold the family silver. We sold the crown jewels. You don't do that because we could have used, an economist calculated that had we not sold the mines, Dr. Munshya, by between 2000 and 2015, would have had $25 billion saved up in our sovereign wealth fund. Now, Tulelila Shinga, what are we owing? Tell me what we're owing. $14 billion is what the Minister of Finance told us. That is what we're losing sleep over. But we did the silly thing of selling the silver. Would have had $25 billion. Now, what are we going to do with that sovereign wealth fund? You know what you do when you have a sovereign wealth fund? You can then supercharge entrepreneurship. Right? That's what Norway does. Norway, and you know what's so funny about this world is that all these people tell us these stories about you can't run natural resources on your own. They do the exact opposite. When Norway discovered oil in 1970, they create a state oil company called Statoil.
Yeah.
And Norway has $1 trillion of assets in its sovereign wealth fund, cater for people under 10 million. $1 trillion, Munshya. And what they do with that $1 trillion, they invest it abroad. And it earns them, say, even if it earned them 1% interest, that's enough money to power Norway forever. That's why Norway has free daycare, Norway has free healthcare, free hospital. But when it comes to us, they tell us a story that you can't do it. You can't do it.
Why do you think they tell us that we can't be in charge of our own natural resources?
They want them. They want them. It's like this land, you can't manage kuchitatiwi landi. Pelengine. One from town. Exactly. I'll create some jobs. Kabika koka skulu. Ka pit latrine toilet outside. I'll help you. I mean, it's self-serving. I mean, we all, it is selfish. I mean, it makes sense, right? When you think about it. Yeah, why does Canada want to own Zambian mines? Canadian companies want to own Zambian mines. It makes them a lot of money. It's like,
simple logic. Yeah, so would you propose we find money through local mobilization? And if you do, how much increase in task do you think that will require before further plunging of the economy?
Again, that's a narrative, Linda, right? It's like if we increase tax, we plunge the economy. Again, that's a narrative.
Do you think we wouldn't?
No, it's not entirely true. I mean, if you do it smartly, obviously.
How smartly, Dr. Grieve?
I mean, if you do it smartly, you could raise, for example, historically, right? There have been moments in history, not in Zambia, but say in other parts of the world where taxes have been incredibly high. And those moments have coincided with general prosperity. So it is possible. It's not certainly the case that if you raise taxes on the corporate sector will collapse. Zambia Sugar will need to produce sugar, come what may. Zambia breweries will need to brew beer, come what may. Zambia bottlers, or now it's Zambia bottlers as part of Zambia breweries, will need to continue producing beer, come what may. So it's not the truth. It's not they will scare you. And one of the things that we need to think about in this country that we haven't thought about quite properly is the issue of lobbying, right? We have a situation where before the budget is prepared, very few people have access to that Ministry of Finance. right? It is the Chamber of Commerce, the Chamber of Mines. Tama youth, so these people lobby and they tell self-serving stories that they say, Minister, if you don't reduce the tax to Kaya, you know what? Maybe Muye. People still need to drink beer. If you go, somebody else will make beer. Maybe we will make the beer ourselves. You know.
We start drinking Lutuku instead.
It's a game of chicken that we play with private sector. Private sector is very tricky.
Yeah, the theories are sounding very, very good, Dr. Grieve, right? The theories, but when it comes to you are in the thing and you have this debt that you've got to deal with, and you've got real people that you must take care of.
Yeah.
To what extent can all those ideas work? Very easy for you to say, we can just tell these companies, you go your own way and we'll find an alternative. When in actual fact, this is not like beer. Investment in extractive industries is not like beer. It's a little bit more complex. It requires a little bit more money. It requires a lot of capital and a lot of know-how. So you've got to do a delicate balance, a delicate dance. You don't think so?
I agree. No, I agree with you entirely. And sometimes you bring out the radicalness in me, but I think when one is in the Ministry of Finance building, certainly one has to have a cool, calm head. And I agree with you, Dr. Munshya. But also we have to understand the people we're dealing with. These people have taken us for a ride for quite a while, right? When I heard that number, that Mopani had not declared a profit in its 20-year history, I said, this is complete, as Linda would say in the UK, bollocks, because really, so what was Glencore still doing if they were making losses on that mine for 20 years? Kwali wa business wa Munshya na imweka Ntemba kenu 20 years tamlepanga profit, but you're still
there.
So I think we're dealing with people who are not very honest. That's the point I'm trying to make. We've been dancing with them for quite a while, but that dance has not been it's been a one-sided dance. It has been one side giving too much to the other and the other not coming to the party. That's what worries me. And I don't know, how do you deal with people like this? I don't know, That's
so we have a crisis obviously at the moment, and we are looking for solutions that are going to serve us now.
Correct.
We have a huge debt. I know that we've looked at all these theories of what works and what doesn't work. We have huge debt. We have these subsidies we are paying every month. Now, sometimes language changes. It might not be subsidies, but whatever payment that we are paying, there is a lot. If you had the chance to change something in that budget, what would it be?
The first thing I would do is I would not make mineral royalty tax deductible.
Okay.
Right? This
that will earn you another 1 billion?
Well, potentially even more, because we don't know how much we're losing. Because remember, they're going to expense it from their revenue. So I don't know how much more we're losing. I mean, it's an incalculable amount of money. So I'd close that loophole, right? I'll try to close that loophole. I would not drop the corporate income tax rate from 35% to 40%. I'll try to hike it even more, right? That's what I'll do. And that should raise me a substantial amount of money. And then what will I do? And then I'll talk to our creditors, right? Now, again, I don't know if it's too late now, but I would engage them pretty early on. When I win, immediately I win and everybody's celebrating me on the BBC, CNN, ZNBC, Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, British Broadcasting Corporation, Australian TV. I would then say, Bane, yes, I've won. And I know you're happy for me. Now, guess what? I need to succeed. And you guys also need to get your money back. So, tien to lande. And I'll try to restructure some of these debts that are due quite soon. Now, I'm only Grieve Chelwa, right? There's a building. One of the things that people always point to me, what are the solutions, Grieve? Tell us the solutions. I say, look, it's enough for me to point out the shortcomings, provide general outline of a solution like I have done, but the actual practical issues, there are people in that building who are paid well to come up with some solution. But this is what I would do in a nutshell, Munshya. I would not give out some of these largesse to the corporate sector like has happened in this budget. We've made a choice. That's a choice we've made to give out largesse to the corporate sector, but deny our people subsidies. This is a choice we've made. And then I would caution the poor. Don't remove the subsidies. I would increase the tax exemption threshold when it comes to pay as you earn, so that I give our people relief, tax relief. This is what I would do. That's how I would balance it.
They need it. They need it. They've suffered for the past 7 years. It's just been insane.
That's exactly what I would do.
So on ZESCO, we are losing money. How would you hope to resolve that?
And again, that's a narrative. How are we losing money? This narrative of it is costing us is a very bad narrative, because the logical conclusion of that narrative is to kambokola that abana be school 12 years to balipira fye school. We just pay for them for 12 years. We are wasting money. Tukaleki. Not realizing we're actually investing. So this ZESCO is a strategic national asset that powers. Dr. Munshya, let me finish the point I'm making. ZESCO powers this economy. You know that. The spillover effects from having a ZESCO are incalculable, that we cannot even begin to think about it in those terms. Yes, we can fix the management issues. We can fix some of the, I think it's common knowledge that there are problems administratively at ZESCO.
Big ones.
To begin to think about, no, we are wasting money, when the thing is the thing that powers the entire economy. You and I are having this discussion now because ZESCO is powering this particular conversation, and the spillovers are huge, because I can interact with my brother and sister who live in the diaspora, and other people can watch, right? We have to stop this narrative of it is a cost. One has also heard it within Denny. By the way, this is exactly what happened in the 90s. Things were deemed as costs, when those things had spillover effects, massive spillover effects. We now don't even spend on research in our universities. The government does not fund research, because in the 90s, it was conceived as a waste of expenditure. And because of that, we don't have innovation. We can't improve our seed varieties. All these kinds of spillover effects that matter.
This is the issue I have. So Dr. Grieve,
narratives are important.
Okay. Now, let's just stay there. This government wants to make mineral tax royalty tax deductible.
Mm-hmm.
You say it that's a cost, and you say that is an inexcusable cost, and you're saying that you don't want it, and you have called it a cost. They're calling it's a way to attract foreign direct investment that expands our copper industry and makes it more competitive. On the other hand, you are saying that ZESCO is loss-making or it's costing us is wrong. Don't you see that these two ideas are conflicting in your own mind, or no? This costing is much more tolerable than the other costing.
Yeah, by the way, this is they're not the same, because the ZESCO cost is a cost we incur ourselves to keep something dear to us like ZESCO keep running. That's a different thing entirely, right? Now, the other one, who pays for that? Who pays for that? The economy itself should generally pay for it, because ZESCO powers in the breweries. ZESCO powers the mines.
The economy. That's the thing. We must produce. We must have money in the economy for the economy to pay for ZESCO. If there is no money in the economy to pay for ZESCO, who is going to pay for ZESCO?
We are already producing copper-wise, so the thing is, we need to keep more money that is coming from the copper.
Correct, Linda. And the point, and that's an important point. We need to think some economies incur costs, because those costs are important to power the economy. One of them is we send our children to school, and I'm glad in the New Dawn government, education is free. That's amazing.
That is brilliant.
We need to do more of that kind of stuff. We send our people to school. And in the olden days, Dr. Kalialia, Dr. Stumbeko didn't pay a single cent all the way up until PhD. Because we made those investments, so that many years later we can have a central bank governor who knows how to do his job, who's educated. We could have a minister of finance who knows how to do his job. We could have a president who's educated by us, the people. We incurred those costs because we could see the spillover effect.
Yeah.
We could have had a president who is a grade 2 if we hadn't done that. But fortunately, KK had the foresight to think about us now, right? So that's the point I'm making about ZESCO. ZESCO is so strategic. It is so super important. Zambia breweries cannot make a single beer without ZESCO. Zambia Sugar cannot produce a single packet of sugar without ZESCO. The mines cannot produce a single copper, whatever they call those things, cannot mine copper without ZESCO. It is a justifiable cost precisely because of
we need it. It's one of those things we can't do without. So
the Zambia Defense Forces, right? We spend money having a standing military, standing defense forces. Somebody will come and tell us one day, Vane, you're wasting money. They can and then voila, Angola will invade us, make us their slaves. So this is exactly what I'm trying to say, Musha, that we shouldn't run a country like it is a business. A country is a very complex thing with multiple objectives, multiple time horizons. Things that make sense for Musha law, where Musha law would say, fire Grieve Chelwa is a useless lawyer. For a country as a whole, it might not make sense. This is all I'm trying to say, that a country should not be run like a business.
Dr. Grieve, you have a comment here from one of our viewers, going back to the copper conversation. Copper mining, he says, is a huge capital intensive venture. Where will you get capital to ensure continued efficient operations of the mining?
I mean, yeah, that's a super important question. Where would we get the capital from? Again, I mean, with a well-orchestrated plan, what do I know? First of all, I know that the world will be scrambling for copper for many years to come, right? Precisely because of what's happening with electric cars and the green transition, the energy transition, right? So we can use that to our advantage, right? We raised in the PF government, I mean, obviously, I mean, this, it was misused, but we raised about 3.5 or $3.25 billion from issuing bonds, right? We were supposed to invest. So there are all those kinds of avenues, right? We just have to be creative, right? We can do it. You could raise the money. There are people who want a return, right? There are people who want a return. We put together a package. We put together a prospectus. We go and shop it around. The point I made again 2 months ago, and I'm making it a little less more as we go along, but this is the president's line of expertise, for crying out loud. This is his strong point. We had Mwanawasa was a lawyer, and but we have an economist who's not just an academic economist like me, but we have an economist who's practical business experience.
Very savvy. I almost feel like I need to have you and Trevor Sumumba on the same platform. I have a ritual.
He's my older brother. I respect him a lot. Yeah.
I have ritual Mona saying, where does Dr. Chelwa want us to get the money to spend more from? Is it correct to suggest that we can brush off Eurobond creditors on the pretext that they took the bid? I think you took the bait. What are your what would the ramifications be? Trevor Sumumba had a different assessment. So basically, what will be the implications on us saying to the Eurobond, oh yeah, you took a punt on us, and now we can't manage to pay you. Oh, suck it up.
Yeah, I think I'm not, Linda, I wish you were in the administration because you're much more radical than I am. I think the point is not to say brush them off.
Yeah.
We're not saying no. I think we would say, look, Vane, things have changed. First of all, COVID, unexpected, right? And also we had an irresponsible government. Now, these things, happen. So can we talk? Give us some space. Give us some breathing room. I'm not saying brush them off. And the language I'm using is
the language is obviously. Yes. I think they're a bit more radical than you are.
Which is encouraging. Yeah, I'm encouraged to see that my citizenry are more radical than I am. But I think it is to say, let us talk like grown men and women, like adults. Let us sit around the table. Don't just say, so look, things have changed. We had an irresponsible government that you took a bet on. We have a new government. You have our word that we will pay, but we can't pay I don't think that's so unreasonable. By the way, it's not like there's not a historical the English is escaping me, but it's not like this hasn't happened before. Countries negotiate sovereign debt all the time.
We're not reinventing the wheel.
We're reinventing the wheel. Companies companies renegotiate these kinds of deals all the time. Again, this is a president's strong point.
Yes. He has said himself, he's the chief negotiator for Zambia, the biggest salesperson. And I don't have any doubt that he could do this if that's the trajectory they wanted to go on.
Yeah, I think it's the advice he's getting. I think for me, I have a lot of respect for Dr. Stumbeko Msokotwane, but I think he's very academic-y, right? I think he's spent a lot of his time as a technocrat, right? Who, thinks about things in a certain way. And I think, one thing that Mwanawasa did when he became president, he was both president and minister of defense, if you recall, in first cabinet. He was first minister of defense in his own cabinet. I wish Hakainde had been minister of finance and president. I think we might have had a different kind of story there. I think that's what's happened. I think for me, that's the stumbling block. I think it's Dr. Msokotwane's view. Yeah, like Dr. Munshya said, we have different ideologies in economics. I think Dr. Msokotwane has this view that says, it is almost a view of saying we are the problem. We got ourselves into this. We should get ourselves out of it. Not to say we were both dancing. The outsiders and us were both dancing. We both got ourselves into this mess. Let us meet each other halfway. That, for me, I think is what's going on here.
Financial endeavor would be incredible. I would love to see a conversation with Dr. Grieve Chelwa, Mr. Simumba, and the Minister of Finance together.
That would be interesting. By the way, we also have a lot of women economists in the country, and
I personally love
Bisa
Moyo.
Yes, exactly. Also get Dambisa on this thing.
Yes,
that's true. That's my sense. My sense, I think, is I really think something that for me is the source, I think, of the problem. I have a lot of respect for Dr. Msokotwane, like I said here, but I think he has a certain view of recovery, and I disagree with that view of recovery. It's one that says we inflict pain on ourselves to recover, when we could say, no, let's share this pain. Imama Eurobond investors, tatualiko.
But what would you say to this argument if you bring that budgeting very, you break it down to the family level? You've got a couple, one of you has to go back to school to study. That's an investment. You were talking about ZESCO. It's an investment that we need to make. So one of you has to go to study, then you have just one salary. So you have to tighten your belts. No more lattes. You make coffee in a flask to take to work. So bring it back to the Zambian economy. So Mr. Stumbeko is saying, let's tighten our belts. These are tough times. Let's bear this and try and pay off as much as we can. So maybe that's the school of thought he's coming from. What would you say to that? It can't be that bad. Do you think that is such a terrible line of thinking?
And I like the idea of a household, and I like how you picked lattes. I think most people agree lattes are luxuries. We could cut those out.
Let's say Tumbo instead of
Amalaiti. No, Amalaiti. Amalaiti nomba tukaleta kolowoi na makenduro.
Yes.
That's what he's saying. And I disagree with that.
Okay.
You see, you can choose tuarafu miapo cable TV. Katushi kunotulanda DSTV.
Yes,
DSTV. Sky.
Or Netflix.
Or Netflix. Okay, that's fine. Nobody's, I'm a minister bakulenda mafiet uno. Okay, well, we're talking. Nomba tino amalaiti to arashmi amalaiti bane kolowoi araisa. You see, it's a choice of the things we're cutting off that I disagree with.
All right, fair enough.
Yeah.
Of course, my major concerns has been if it's a cost, it's a cost, and somebody must pay for it, right? And who is going to pay for it? Though that's a much more critical issue. The other thing is I'm not noticing any fundamental differences in the way you're articulating things and in the way the government is articulating it. Yeah, I think I get the sense that it's just the way you guys are defining what the solution is. Otherwise, in the solutions you are giving, you want to say that it is the resources, it is the copper that is going to give us the money to resolve the problems that we have. The resources is going to give us the solution. But there is also this school of thought that it's actually either us making our services be cost reflective, or we go on a borrowing spree to cover it up. I think there is very clearly the same solutions, except that you economists are framing it very differently. On negotiation, what I'm noticing is that what you have actually said is what this government did right from the start. So I don't know why that is very difficult for you to acknowledge that, yes, this government has been, in fact, negotiating with Eurobond holders. You disagree with that?
No, I don't. First of all, to say that I have no fundamental differences with this government is to suggest I haven't been very clear, because I think I do. I fundamentally disagree with the economic plans of this government pretty clearly. But to talk about if they've been negotiating, and like I said, the narrative has been one of, we're negotiating because we want to pay you back entirely, and we're going to meet your obligations. And that's the part I disagree with. I think pretty early on, we should have set the terms to say, we're going to negotiate, and the outcome we're looking for is that we both bear the cost of what just happened with the Eurobonds. You can't go scot-free, Vane. After all, you voluntarily gave your money to Mao Sampa. You know, Mao Sampa was actually Deputy Minister of Finance at the time. And funny enough, Mao Sampa, I think Bwaliang went around the world on a roadshow to sell our Eurobonds anyways. But you gave this money voluntarily to that government, right? You took a risk on that government. So governments have changed. I think it's common knowledge that was a very careless government, and you guys gave them the money. And not only once, you gave them twice again, because you gave them a second Eurobond and a third Eurobond. Now, let us meet each other halfway. That's, I think, the spirit with which those negotiations should be happening. But I don't think that's the spirit in which those negotiations are happening. We had the president himself speak at the airport when he came back from Glasgow. It was quite clear that we have an obligation to the Eurobond investors to pay them in full. I see the rest of the army is here, and I'm in trouble now.
The army.
Yeah, but that's the point I'm making. Yeah, and also the other point I want to make, Dr. Munshya, is that one should not confuse a household budget with the government. Often we have this thing of saying, oh, if we subsidize ZESCO, right, don't mistake a household budget with a national budget. Subsidizing ZESCO powers the economy, right? When the economy is powered, it creates GDP from which we can then tax. We have to understand, because
there is no. On the other hand, you're saying that subsidizing ZESCO powers the nation.
Mm-hmm.
But another person is saying that subsidizing some income taxes on corporations may power the nation.
You're saying me.
So there is still powering the nation somewhere, except that you think that letting us continue to pay very little for ZESCO will help us grow, whereas overtaxing corporations will, whereas as taxing the corporations at a lower rate is not working, is not workable, right? So I think there is some sacrifice, there is some lower thing that we can do, there is some subsidizing that we can do. Except that your subsidizing is to go to subsidize the rest that we are paying at ZESCO and the rest that we are paying for fuel, and not subsidizing
the corporate sector.
Corporations.
I agree, because
I think the temptation is that no matter how much resources you have, like copper is quite unpredictable. This year it's quite high, but in a few years' time it may go down.
And let's do the best we can now. So let us get much from it now before the commodity super cycle goes in there.
That's why perhaps it's important for our services to be cost reflective, because if they are cost reflective now, we are planting enough discipline in ourselves that tomorrow we are going to benefit from it. But if we continue on this current trajectory, the problem is we keep doing the same thing over and over again. Copper clashed in 1970. Copper is likely to clash in 5 to 10 years' time. We'll be back at the same problem again. Kenneth Kaunda might have educated Denny Kajaria, and you are too young to be educated.
No, he didn't, but his policies did, because I went to university.
So he did that, right?
And I got a meal allowance every year for 4 years at UNZA, which I shared with my mother and father, by the way.
Yes. Now copper prices went down. So where did we get the money in the meantime to do that? We borrowed, didn't we? So I think the more clear position is, your position must begin looking at these other alternatives as well. And perhaps once we have some consensus together as a nation, it will be far much easier for us to progress. Otherwise, you are confusing us, we are getting confused, and so we don't know what is the solution.
I apologize for confusing such a distinguished lawyer and prominent Zambian as yourself. I'm very sorry. The fault is all mine.
You're fine. You just have to
I think the point I want to make, Dr. Munshya, before we maybe open up the larger group, is to say, economic policy is not just hard facts. Sometimes we also have to bring in some aspects of what we think of as morality, what we think of as the good thing to do, right? So subsidizing electricity tariffs also allows our grandmothers, grandfathers, people who ordinarily would not afford electricity to afford electricity. And I think that's a useful thing to add into the calculus. Also, subsidizing electricity and energy allows, because the energy is such a vital input into the production process of almost everything. There's market women, Dr. Munshya, who early morning from Matero get on a bus to go and order tomato at Soweto market to go and resell. If you don't keep that price of petrol down, their bus fare will go up, and immediately they'll be knocked out insofar as being able to. And also the other thing that often happens when energy prices go up, we see a lot of deforestation happening. So one has to be very careful, and I think we shouldn't set economic policy like we are just playing with a calculator and just counting ngwes, dollars and cents, or ngwes and kwachas or whatever. We have to be careful. We have to think about these other things. We have to think about the fact that some services have to be kept cheaper, so that a large fraction of our people who are also human, who also want to enjoy the electricity that we enjoy, who also want to get on a bus and pay a reasonable fare when they travel from Lusaka to Chingola, when travel from Lusaka to Chewempala via Kitwe or whatever. We have to think about these things. Otherwise, like I said, the logic of this kind of analysis is to say, Abanaweka at 12 years muscle, what a waste. Let us stop spending on these kids. We have to know that some costs are justifiable precisely because they have spillover effects, right? And also precisely that they give us a common sense of belonging. The fact that the government is looking out for my electricity bill makes me feel like this government cares. And therefore, I feel like I really belong to Zambia. And I feel like this is a really free country. This is what economic policy making is about. It's not a company. This is a country. And the country has to be dealt with delicately. Now, everybody in the world, even those first world, even where you are, Dr. Munshya, I imagine that your tariff that you pay for your gas, for whatever, I imagine that there are some people who get subsidized gas because they're poor. Otherwise, they'll freeze to death. This is how countries, in the US, agriculture subsidies are to the tune of $20 billion. In Europe, agriculture subsidies are the tune of $40 billion. It is just here where they tell us these kind of things, which are going to socially dislocate our people. Imagine now that grandmother has to pay cost reflective.
Dr. Grieve, agriculture is subsidized in Zambia. But we subsidize agriculture in Zambia through FISP, don't we?
And we should continue. That's the point I'm trying to make. Everybody subsidizes.
So the thing is, the gist that I'm getting is that our current policies are not subsidizing enough. That is just not accurate. We live in a subsidizing economy in Zambia. The only thing is, faced with these fundamental economic problems, how do we get out of these problems that are glaring before us?
Yeah, because, well, I mean,
yes, we have subsidized agriculture in Zambia. We have subsidized electricity. What's good about subsidized electricity if half of the time we don't have it? Baba alebeyo muntu emishishi. Ale kusuro muntu. In the middle of kusula, event of yapena. Amakayapwa.
Half of something is better than I'm just kidding. No, but I think, I mean, there are several issues here. I think the blackouts that we've been receiving over the last 10 years or so are due to the fact that we weren't investing in power. Now, one can make the argument that, because we weren't collecting cost-reflective tariffs, that's the reason why we weren't investing in power. That's one argument that one can make, but I think one can also make the other argument that investing in power should not come from tariffs. Investing in power should come from other aspects of revenue. When the KKs were adding on to Kariba, when they were putting, these other power stations that they were laying in the 70s, right? They were not saying, we're going to get this money from the money that the village woman is paying for electricity or whatever. They were saying, we're going to get this money from somewhere and invest it into power. So what we have been facing the last 10 years is precisely because we weren't adding onto our generating capacity, because we weren't investing. And I don't think the argument is to say it is because tariffs weren't cost reflective. No, we weren't just making the right kind of investments into energy, right? That's what we just stopped doing that.
On TV Vakwetu today, we have a very renowned economist, Dr. Grieve Chelwa. And he has been giving us an idea to the solutions that we have at the moment. And he has been very great in explaining to us exactly what those solutions would be. Definitely, an endeavor must be had, I think. Perhaps we should have it right here on TV Vakwetu with you. And several other people that belong to a different school of thought.
That would be amazing.
Going to to you, our TV Vakwetu family, for a minute. And ask Dr. Grieve in a minute. Don't greet him. Don't say hello. Please do. 1 minute. We're going to begin with Mr. Mapanza Mkwilimba. Mr. Mkwilimba.
Thank you, Doc. Mine is perhaps a simplistic question coming from the streets of Monze. We are talking about bringing resources into a basket so that we can use those resources for what we need to do as a country. And in that mix, we are talking about the IMF, which the doctor, I think, is against. And to a certain extent, I think I agree with him. The question really is, that mix which is brought in the basket, I think there's total silence on other sources of revenue other than copper. What about resources that could come from other minerals? Where do we stand with that? Is that look? Nobody's talking about the emeralds that we have. Nobody's talking about the gold. that is being discovered. And there are so many other such resources where there's total silence, and yet we could get something there into the basket and perhaps minimize what we get from IMF. That's what bothers me really, is why is there such a silence on other resources?
Mr. Mapanza, so good to see you again. And that's a super interesting question you've asked. That's a question we ought to be asking. We ought to be mobilizing and saying, why aren't we talking about the emerald sector, the gold sector, and these other kinds of minerals? And if the story of Faith Musonda is anything to go by that story, it seems like there's a lot of money that is hiding away in that particular sector. So I agree. I'm also at pains, Mr. Mapanza, to not understand why don't we have a comprehensive mining policy that also looks at these other sort of God-given gifts. These are gifts God gave us for free. He gave them to us, and I think we should be using them to supercharge our development, and we're not doing that. But we are running for short-termist solutions, right? The IMF is a very short-term solution, and we'll be back again here, because they never permanently solve the problem. But one of the funny things, when you look at an IMF program, and I've studied many of them, they never really say, we want to help you out permanently so that you never come back here. And this is how we're going to do it. Let's help you grow an industrial base. Let's help you tax more money from copper. They never do that. Right? What they always do are very short-termist, boring things like remove subsidies. And then you'll be back here again 5 years from now, 10 years from now. So I agree with you, Mr. Mapanza, that we need to have a comprehensive mining policy. And I think as Zambians, we should be calling for that. Let us go for more transparency in the emerald sector. We don't have transparency. If you think we don't have transparency in the copper sector, and that we don't, and there's a lot of evidence to say that's a very opaque sector of our economy, the emeralds one is even worse. And so is the gold one. So we need to mobilize some more and ask the custodians, the people who we've given custody of this country for the next 5 years, to say, please help us shine light on this thing.
Linda?
I think I'm going to pass mine to, because I've had quite a bit of airtime. I'll pass mine to Kangwa.
Hi, everyone. I'll keep it short. I'll just talk about ZESCO in particular. I've heard Dr. Grieve's comment against removal of subsidies on ZESCO. My concern is that, yes, ZESCO is a government-owned institution, but just because it's government-owned, we also want it to be self-sustaining, and currently in its state, it's not self-sustaining. So what do we need to do to ensure that it's self-sustaining and is able to provide quality and is able to expand? I think 5 years ago, the government embarked on rural electrification program, and I think that program has been halted. So my suggestion, I agree with the government. The government needs to remove the subsidies so that the tariffs are cost reflective and so that we can have competition. Currently, we don't have competition in our electric sector because foreign investors don't find it attractive at the current tariffs, and this prevents quality provision of services. So we need to bite the bullet, remove the subsidies, improve the quality, and have competition in that sector. If it means breaking down ZESCO into production, generation, and supply, let's do that. I think in the long run, we'll all benefit. Subsidies make us over-dependent. We need to ensure that public institutions remain self-sustaining and are not constantly going back to government for handouts. That's my submission.
Thanks, Kangwa. That's a super interesting point you're making. I think there are points of agreement. I think the one point of agreement is that certainly ZESCO needs to be cleaned up, right? I think this has been a constant problem we've always had, that ZESCO has always been politicized. ZESCO has problems administratively. But I don't think removal of the subsidy is a solution to solving those administrative problems. Let's solve the administrative problems themselves. Let's professionalize ZESCO one way or the other. We get experts who can help us. We've got experts on how to professionalize a company internally. They help us professionalize ZESCO. But again, the other thing is we ought to think about just how much of a strategic asset ZESCO is. I don't want my electricity generation in the hands of a foreign company, to be honest. This is a strategic national asset. Imagine, for example, if you will, that we got some foreign participation in electricity generation, and a substantial chunk of electricity is generated by some American company. Then for one reason or the other, sanctions are hit on Zambia, right? And then immediately, what happens when you're put on a sanctions list? The US immediately says, stop doing business with that country. And those people turn off the lights. What happens? I mean, there are just some things that are too important to entrust to foreign nationals. In the US, for example, there's a reason why they subsidize the production of wheat, even when they produce so much of it, because they think of food as a strategic asset. The US never wants to rely on wheat imports from another country, because they know those people can turn off the taps one day. They can say, we're not sending the food, and then you starve. This is why for them, they have said, we will waste money subsidizing wheat so that we always have enough wheat, even overflowing to the extent that sometimes we dump it off in the ocean, because we consider this to be something of strategic value to us. And I think this is how we ought to think about ZESCO. We ought to think about it in those lines. But that's not a license, and I think this is the point you're making, Kangwa. That's not a license for abuse on the part of people who work in ZESCO. That's not a license to be unprofessional. That's not a license for shoddy service, right? That is a privilege. We think of them like that. It's a privilege, and they should use that privilege in a useful way. This is how I would look at it. I think let's professionalize ZESCO, right? Let's clean it up, but let's continue to think of it as a strategic national asset, without which we're in trouble. And we cannot, I think, right, outsource some aspects of that to foreign investors, or even domestic ones. Right? Because what happens when some person or some sections of the population don't pay the bills, those people will just shut off the lights. Economy yaingira number recession. ZESCO, I imagine, engages people. I imagine they say, Bane, we know you're very important. They had that tiff with the mines, if you remember. I think there was a tiff they had with the mines about being owed money or whatever. But they didn't turn off the lights. They engaged in deliberation. That's what it means to have a strategic national asset. Because this logic, and like I gave the example, the end of this logic is one day we'll say, let us outsource our army. Let us just now have some foreign investment in our, some aspects of defense. Outsource. Americans, you don't do that. Some things are just so important that you have to own them and have total control over them. That's the point I make. But I agree with you, Kangwa. You're making the larger point that ZESCO needs to be cleaned up, and that I agree.
Thank you so much. I would just want to say thank you. Let me not go there, because we've been told not to greet you. I was looking forward to say hi.
Since he got a PhD, has become very, very rude, I've noticed.
Absolutely. I don't know what this PhD has done.
He's grown a big head. I'm joking.
It was really very nice and very thoughtful and very eye-opening whenever we have you around such a wonderful symposium. But I have questions. Actually, I was thinking in line of, they say, fool me once, shame on me. I mean, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me. And once bitten, twice shy. We have been there before. We have seen, we have given investors tax rebates or whatever we call it. And we saw that they just came in and gotten rich, and then they left the country and unannounced, actually. When we gave them about 5 years, 10 years tax rebate, whatever, And then we were coming back and doing the same things. And the professionals, the economists, are these guys not seeing that we are being redundant, doing the same old crap that does not work? It is not working in our favor, and our people are going backwards and starving more. What is it that we are doing wrong? Chelwa? I'm really beginning to think that maybe we are having wrong people in offices, that we think they are our savers. They're going to bring some kind of different test to our Zambian economy. But Nikuisa, where are we heading?
Thank you.
Thank you, Kelewa, and it's nice to see you again. You're right. It also breaks my heart that we are, like I say, all of us here are old enough to remember the tax holidays of the 1990s. We gave a lot of tax holidays, tax exemptions. And like I said, those are costs. Remember, when you choose not to tax a company, it is a cost to the fiscus, to the treasury. Because, and think about those costs in terms of what we could have done with that money. Right? We could have built a school somewhere in Kwahai or Mklevai. You know, we could have built a road somewhere here and there. But you think about those things as a cost. But that cost should be justifiable to the extent that this incentive we've given will bring in so much investment that will create jobs, grow the economy, and pay for that cost that was foregone. But that's not what has happened, precisely because of what you said. They play games with us. They lobby for tax holidays. When the holiday expires, Babutuka. I mean, the story that Mopani told broke my heart, that they hadn't made a profit in 20 years. Just tells you the kind of games these people play with us. And I think we need to invert the narrative. We need to begin to say, what about us? What incentives are we giving to local entrepreneurs? What support are we giving them? Because we're always bending over backwards for the mythical foreign investor and not thinking domestically. Some things can we run ourselves? You know, Dr. Musha challenged me on that. Some things can we run them ourselves, maybe? You know, can we get some, I disagree with many things that the Patriotic Front government did, but one of the things that I agree with in principle, I disagree with how it was operationalized, was KCM and Mopani, right? I disagree. You know, that was the other problem with the PF. They would have like a great idea, but implementation, it is just riddled with theft, confusion, and those kind of things. So the principle to take over KCM and Mopani, in principle, that's a grand thing to do, especially given where copper prices are going, right? We can then, if we own these things, right, or at least we get into a joint venture with somebody who can bring in some capital, but we retain majority ownership, 51%, the dividends that would come, because if we're owning 51%, we are on the board, we're also in charge of looking at the accounts. So tax dodging can be reduced. We make sure on the board there's a person from ZRA. We make sure in the companies we position people from the Revenue Authority. So tax dodging is limited. Now, if we get this revenue, we know copper won't be with us forever. Dr. Musha has told us a crash might come, but we use the revenues from there to supercharge other aspects of enterprise in our economy. Norway doing this. Norway had oil. They knew oil had a short horizon. They saved up this money, and now they invest in either Norwegian businesses or businesses abroad. Right, the Norwegian Sovereign Wealth Fund is one of the biggest private equity investors in the world. That's what we ought to be doing. Mamonavena, they never let go of their resources. They are so important, so strategic. But if we undress ourselves for the mythical foreign investor, I
live here and I'm a beneficiary. Pamasuku yava
Abasungu know what to do. Chimu?
Yeah, hey, thanks for having me. Dr. Grieve, I totally agree with what you're saying, right? So I have a couple of questions. Why is it so hard for people in Zambia to learn the lessons of the IMF and World Bank from what they did in South America? Because they got kicked out of South America for a reason. Like, why can't we learn those lessons, and especially with what recently happened in Greece? That's one question. Second one is, why can't we follow the Codelco and Canadian Crown Corporation model, in terms of running like strategic assets? I share your viewpoint. ZESCO is non-negotiable. You cannot leave that into private hands, and so are the mines, especially given where we're going towards a green economy. China is investing trillions. Then my last question is, what's wrong with our civil service? Are they stuck in a colonial mindset? Like, what would it actually take to get, real professionals who've done it in the real world to safeguard our economy? Thanks.
Thank you, Chimu, for excellent. And I like Latin America, and I think I like that you bring up this story of Latin America. Latin America doesn't give the IMF a chance there. I mean, actually, I don't play. One of the most interesting stories, coming back to Linda's point about radicalness, Argentina defaulted on its debt in 2001. They just said, we're not paying. And do you know what happened? Nothing. The sky was still blue in Argentina the following day. Up until now, Argentina is still borrowing. They defaulted in 2001, and everybody told them the sky will fall on you when you default. They said, you know what, to hell. And yeah, but that's not what I'm proposing. Actually, I'm not that radical. I'm saying let us meet each other halfway. But I just want to say sometimes people start stories.
I'm not radical.
I'm sure Fidel Castro was saying, no, I'm not radical.
Yeah.
But I think what I'm trying to say is sometimes we have to be careful about narratives. Narratives are very powerful. And I think the point that Chimu is making is that why don't we learn from some of those narratives? So I don't know why we don't learn. I really don't know. Part of it is got to do with the way people are taught in school. The way folks are being taught at the university now, it's so much emphasis on on practical things, which is useful, but sometimes history is also important. Right? Teach people history, teach people those kinds of things. And my own discipline is terrible. You'll be hard pressed to find an economist in this country, aside from my older brother Trevor Simumba, because I think we see certain things eye to eye on. But most economists are trained to be free market capitalist in orientation, not to think about before you're a citizen of the world, you are Zambian first, and that's important to know. That's really important to know. And then the other thing about, you're right, Codelco and the Canadian example you gave, everybody who's sensible in the world has strategic assets, especially natural resources. You don't see a lot of strategic sort of things in the Western world because they don't have a lot of resources, natural resources, very few places. But the places where they do, they always keep them. Saudi Arabia, what is that company called? Aramco. Yeah, Aramco is a state company that controls the Saudis, that runs the Saudi oil. And what do they do with the money that they make from Aramco? They invest it. Mohammed bin Salman, that is what he's trying to do now. He's thinking about the future of Saudi Arabia and he's worried when the oil runs out or when the world greens, what happens to us? So they're investing hurriedly in many other spheres of the economy or making investments abroad. I gave you that number. Had we not sold the mines in 2000, we would have saved up $25 billion. Imagine what we would have done with that money. Powered our young people, right, to do entrepreneurship. We would have funded our universities to engage in the kind of research and development that we require to power economies, the kind of innovation that context-specific. How can we improve our maize varieties, our soybean varieties? How can we, all those kinds of things that are really how can we make sure that we don't suffer from cholera every year to year? These are kinds of problems that require innovation, but that innovation has to be funded, right? So I agree with you. The last point you made, I forgot to see. Chimu.
I can repeat it. It was basically a shot at the civil service.
Right? Civil service.
Yeah, the colonial mindset. Why is it so hard to get real professionals who have real world experience and who don't think like they're still under colonial rule?
I think my sense is that we have a very professional civil service, but we don't allow it to do its job. My interactions, I think I was on this program when I told Dr. Munshya about the debt figures, and there was a big story. The Ministry of Finance, and I said, no, Dr. Munshya, actually they do know, but they're not being allowed to do their job. What the problem we have is one where we outsource policy making to outsiders. So you will find that our civil service, at least the principals in our civil service, you know, the problem we have is that we have let a lot of people to come into our kitchens and help us cook the soup. But we actually have a very professional civil service. When I talk to people at the Ministry of Finance, especially the career civil servants there, they know these things. They know about getting money from copper. They know about, but we're not allowing them. We're not creating the environment for them to be professional. We have some very smart people there. I kid you not. But often what happens is one day I went to a named ministry when I was doing some research, and I was wanted to see the permanent secretary. And I asked, I'd made an appointment, I was told to. So I sat there waiting, I waited. A bunch of people from some named foreign country, with their $8 arrived. They went straight into the permanent secretary's office. And there I was, waiting to be attended to. So this is the thing, this is the problem we have. We have outsourced, we've outsourced our policy making. There's a famous saying, it's a Vietnamese saying, that in Vietnam, what is the story? Let me remember the story goes as follows. In Vietnam, when donors get into the car and try and get into the driver's seat, the Vietnamese get out of the car. In Africa, especially in Zambia, when donors get in the car and want to drive the car, Zambians move to the passenger seat.
Yeah.
So I think that's what has happened. So Chimu, that's my thing. My thing is we have a very professional civil service, but we're not allowing it to work for this country.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Dr. Grieve. Yeah, it's quite disheartening listening to that, actually. And I'm hoping that we could be the generation that changes that. Shall we move on to our lovely Bakwetu journalist, Wiseman? Are you there, Wiseman? Maybe Wiseman has fallen asleep. Shall we move to Patrick?
Thank you, Melinda. Well, Dr. Chelwa, I agree with you. So many. Actually, I'm not going to ask you questions, but I'll just mention some of the things you've amplified, some of the things you've talked about. ZESCO. First, we need an economic endeavor. It's a must. Then ZESCO. I agree with you 100%. Everywhere here in the UK, it's the duty of the government to invest in strategic industries. Like here in the UK, the rail lines are owned by the government, and then they only contract people to run the wagons on the rail. That's the duty of the government. The fiber network has been done by the government. So the Zambian government needs to invest in ZESCO. And even tariffs, they need to keep them for now. But ZESCO, because the government gives on one hand, it's an investment. Then they need to reap the returns. There are no returns from ZESCO. So ZESCO needs to be cleaned so that it starts making profits. It starts paying dividends to the government. Zambians start enjoying the benefits of investing into ZESCO. So that's one thing. Then you mentioned about the mines, mineral royalties. I've never heard about mineral royalties that are tax deductible. But I understand the assumption was, should we tell them that they are deductible, then they're going to show huge profits because they'll deduct that money we've given them, as which is an opportunity cost to the people of Zambia, because they could have used that money to build schools and other things. So the assumption was they will show huge profits, but that's not a reality. They might not even show huge profits. So then, but on the mines, Dr. Chelwa, you mentioned something very important. These guys, they will evade tax, they will avoid tax. There's also transfer pricing, especially in the copper mine. And then they externalize sales instead of profits. So most of the things that you've said, we need to own the mines. We need to do it now. And
Thank you.
Do it. Let me just finish by Linda. We've got KCM and Mopani. Let's do the Botswana way. When the beers came to Botswana, they came to the Botswana that we want to buy this mine. We want to invest in this mine. the Swanas said no. We're going to go into a 50-50 joint venture. Run this company, 50-50 board members, so that we know what is happening, because the diamonds belong to the Swanas. And we are not going to put a cent. You're going to bring the capital, but we'll give you the minerals. And it became what is known as the Botswana, the single largest diamond producing mine in the whole world. So by running these two mines, KCM and Mopani, with the investors, with the Zambians, we'll be able to see the sales, the accounting. People will be sitting on the board. How are they going to evade the tax? How are they going to do the tax transfer? And then if they want to externalize the sales, they will leave 50% in Zambia, and they will take the 50% to wherever they are going. Thank you.
Thank you.
Wachirufi, I can't add more. In fact, you have even made me look smarter than I am, because you have nicely summarized and you brought in the example of the Botswana. Exactly. Classic case of joint venture ownership. You will take a 51% stake. What are we bringing to the table? We're bringing the minerals. Imwe, bringing the machinery and the capital. There you have it. You know, it's a lie to say, no, if we don't come to Zambia, to Congo. It's a lie. $11,000 per metric ton tells me there is a shortage of copper on the world markets. Somebody will need to come to Zambia to get our copper and cobalt. They will come. Just like if you're a beautiful lady, the men will come, you know, and ask for your hand in marriage. They will come. We just have to wait. But let's not bend over backwards by giving them all these incentives.
You mean Abashao Pwanishi, they are not beautiful? What are your example?
No, now I've gone into Dr. Musha's area of expertise. I strayed into his.
Don't get distracted.
No further comments, Your Honor.
Okay, so
no, luckily all women in Zambia are beautiful.
Let me help you, Bachelor. Any choice, to decide. Decide.
Exactly. Wonderful. No, we need you at the endeavor.
Right, now Patrick has literally summarized my final question, because I really wanted you to give very clear and concise solutions as to what government could do. And what he has just done there is one excellent example. So take it up. If you have 3 more to add, then we can close.
No, and thank you for closing early today, because I was worried. I said, is this going to be another long one like the last time?
No.
I just want to say that I'm very inspired by the thoughts that people have shared here. And I think this again shows the value of deliberation, of debate, right? I think one of the things that I hope the HH administration will do going forward is to allow for debate before we set ourselves on a certain course. Let's allow for debate. You know, right now, I think economic policy in this country is being forged by very few constituents. The Ministry of Finance, the Bank of Zambia, and with the IMF. I think that is wrong. This is, we should expand the horizon of people who are being consulted. I think that's really important for these policies to be credible, acceptable, and to be popular. It's important to do that. Last thing that I'm going to say. And I think, virtually, if I summarize the points that I made, we need to shift the narrative and begin to look at ourselves not as problems. Often we're looking at ourselves as the problem. Ni fuego twalufiania. Inkongole ni fuego. We were dancing together. Right? We need to change the narrative and begin to look at ourselves as the solution and not as the problem. I think that's how we also be proud of our heritage. We also have a history. We have a history of having run things. We have a history of having built power plants, built universities. You saw the video which was going around Facebook of the university being built in 1966. Ministers were there digging. Ordinary people were there digging. Ordinary people were giving donations. That spirit of togetherness needs to come back. That's what I think, is important to that. So I'm sorry I went into completely off my area of expertise and gave a speech, but I just wanted to say the point I want to make is narrative change. Let's look at ourselves not as the problem, but as the solution. And we've got it. We've got smart people I'm amazed to see Zambians, It's around the world, even domestically, doing all these wonderful things. But what we haven't done is given us Zambian space to be the solution. We've been the problem. That's wrong.
Fantastic. Well, this has been a very interesting day, especially for me, from chatting to Dr. Mjajati to coming into discussing the Bank of Zambia interest rates and all that sort of stuff. If you have just joined us, you have been watching TV Bakwetu, and it was hosted by Dr. Elias Munshya, and I was co-hosting. And we had our special guest, Dr. Grieve Chelwa, who was taking us through the 100 days of the New Dawn government and the Bank of Zambia interest rates and subsidy removal, as well as tax incentives. And we have been so privileged that you joined us, and hopefully you can join us again sometime soon. And from me, it's good night and see you soon.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. I always enjoy having you.
Good night. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Good night.